I knew something was wrong the moment she touched my arm. Not the affectionate squeeze she used to give me when she wanted reassurance, but a deliberate press of her fingers, nails grazing skin just long enough to feel intentional. Calculated. A warning disguised as intimacy. The kind that made my stomach tighten before my mind could catch up. The room was loud, too loud. Music pulsed through the speakers, glasses clinked, laughter bounced off the walls of our friend's house. Warm light, expensive wine, the smell of perfume and cologne mixed with the faint trace of sex that always lingered after a few drinks and too much proximity. People leaning close, hands brushing. Couples remembering who they used to be before responsibilities dulled the edges. My wife stood beside me, radiant in a fitted dress that hugged her body in a way that still pulled my eyes to her, despite everything. She looked confident, glowing. That word people love to use when they think happiness is the only reason a woman shines like that. She raised her glass. The room quieted, as if trained to obey her voice. I watched faces turn toward us. Smiles. Expectation. Phones subtly lifted, ready to record something worth remembering. "You're going to be a father," she said, smiling straight at me. For half a second, time fractured. Then the cheers exploded. People clapped, whistled, shouted congratulations. Someone slapped my back hard enough to jolt me forward. I felt hands grabbing my shoulders, hugs I didn't return. I tasted wine I hadn't drunk yet, metallic and bitter in my mouth. I didn't look at her. I looked across the room. Emily's husband stood frozen near the kitchen island, his glass halfway to his lips. His face had gone pale so fast it was almost impressive, like blood had been drained from him in a single breath. His eyes locked onto mine. Not confused, not surprised. Panicked. Exposed. That was when I stood. The movement alone silenced the room. I could feel it. The shift. People expecting a speech, a joke, a proud smile, something warm. I didn't raise my glass. I didn't smile. "Then congratulations to Emily's husband," I said calmly. The silence was violent. No music, no laughter. Just the low hum of electricity and breath caught in throats. Someone laughed once, sharp, nervous, then stopped when no one joined in. My wife turned toward me slowly. Her smile cracked, just enough. "What?" she asked, too quickly. Emily's husband swallowed. His hand shook. The glass slipped from his fingers and shattered on the floor, the sound echoing like a gunshot. Red wine spread across white tile, a mess no one moved to clean. I finally looked at my wife. Her eyes were wide now, glossy with something that wasn't joy. Fear, maybe. Or calculation failing under pressure. She opened her mouth, closed it, then forced a laugh that landed wrong. "This isn't funny," she said. "You're drunk." I hadn't touched a drop. "I'm sober," I replied. "And I'm done pretending." Murmurs rippled through the room. People glanced between us, between Emily and her husband, trying to piece together a puzzle they didn't know they were standing inside. Emily's face had gone rigid, lips pressed tight, her hand clutching her stomach as if she needed something to hold her upright. I remembered the first time I'd noticed her watching me months ago. Really watching. The way her gaze lingered, the quiet intimacy of shared glances. I remembered the heat that rose in my chest then, the instinctive awareness of sex humming beneath the surface of polite conversation. Back then, I thought it was harmless. Flattery. Nothing more. Now I understood it had been something else entirely. My wife stepped closer to me, lowering her voice. "Stop. You're embarrassing yourself." I leaned in just enough for her to hear me. For only her. "You already did that," I said. "I just made it public." Her breath hitched. For a moment, I saw the woman I'd married, the one who used to pull me into bed with a smile that promised trouble, who knew exactly how to touch me, how to make me feel wanted. Then it vanished, replaced by someone sharper, desperate. Around us, the party had stopped being a celebration and turned into a crime scene. No one knew where to look. No one knew whether to leave or stay. And me? I felt strangely calm, because this moment, this toast, this silence, wasn't an accident. It was the beginning. For a few seconds, no one moved. Then the room reacted the way people always do when reality becomes inconvenient. They tried to laugh it away. Someone near the couch chuckled too loudly. Another voice followed, shaky, saying, "Good one, man." A few smiles flickered and died when they realized I wasn't smiling back. My wife let out a breathy laugh, the kind she used when she wanted to redirect a conversation without causing a scene. "Okay," she said, waving her hand like she was brushing dust off the air. "That's enough. You've had your moment." "I haven't even started," I said. Emily's husband still hadn't picked up another glass. His hands were empty now, useless, hanging at his sides like they didn't belong to him anymore. He wouldn't look at Emily, wouldn't look at my wife. He stared at the floor as if there were instructions written there, something that would tell him how to get out of this. My wife turned to the room, her voice sharpening. "He's stressed. We've been dealing with a lot. This is just his way of coping." "With lying?" someone asked quietly. She ignored it and faced me again. "Say you're joking," she hissed under her breath. "Right now." I felt eyes burning into my skin from every direction. Friends we'd known for years, couples who'd slept in our guest room, people who'd watched us dance, flirt, disappear into bathrooms after too much wine, the promise of sex waiting behind closed doors when the night ended. "I wish I were joking," I said. "That would make this easier." Emily finally spoke. "What are you talking about?" Her voice trembled, but her posture didn't. She was holding herself together better than either of them. "You're being cruel." I looked at her. Really looked. She was beautiful in that effortless way that didn't need permission. I remembered noticing her legs the first summer we'd spent together by the lake. The heat, the awareness that passed between us when we laughed too close. Back then, it had been just tension. Now I understood how easily tension could turn into something else. "I know about the hotel in Chicago," I said. "The one you booked under your maiden name. I know about the texts you deleted and the calls you made after midnight. I know about the weekends that were supposed to be conferences." The room shifted again, this time harder. Someone near the door picked up their coat. My wife's face drained of color. "You went through my phone?" "I didn't have to," I replied. "You got sloppy." Emily's husband finally lifted his head. His eyes were glassy, desperate. "I didn't mean for this to happen," he said, to no one in particular. "It just happened." "That's funny," I said, "because it happened in 3 different cities." A low gasp rippled through the crowd. My wife took a step back from me, as if distance might protect her. "You don't understand," she said. "We were lonely. You were always gone. You stopped seeing me." "That didn't stop you from being seen," I said. Her lips parted, then pressed together. I could almost see the calculations running through her head. What to admit, what to deny, how much truth would buy her sympathy. For a moment, something raw crossed her face. Fear, maybe, or regret. It was gone before I could be sure. Emily's husband shook his head. "This was never supposed to be public." "And yet," I said, gesturing around the room, "here we are." Someone dropped a napkin. Someone else whispered my name like a warning. The party was unraveling fast, conversations breaking into hushed clusters, alliances forming in real time. I caught fragments. Poor guy. How could she? I always suspected. My wife reached for me again, fingers brushing my wrist, familiar, intimate. For a split second, my body reacted before my mind did. Muscle memory. Desire doesn't vanish just because trust does. I pulled away. "That," I said, "is over." Her eyes filled, but no tears fell. Not yet. Behind her, Emily turned on her husband, her voice low and lethal. "You told me this would never come out." He opened his mouth, closed it. There was nothing left to say. The celebration was gone now, replaced by something colder, exposed. I stood in the center of it, strangely steady, as if everything I'd been carrying for months had finally found the air. This wasn't the end of the night. It was just the point of no return. I didn't catch them the way people expect. No lipstick on a collar, no naked bodies reflected in a mirror, no dramatic moment where truth crashes through a door. That kind of discovery belongs to movies. Real betrayal is quieter. It hides in patterns. It started with silence. My wife had always been talkative after trips, dumping stories on me while she kicked off her shoes, the familiar rhythm of our life slipping back into place. Then, slowly, that changed. She came home distracted, phone face down, answers shorter. When I touched her, she still let me, but her body wasn't fully there. Sex became efficient, clean, missing the messy hunger we used to share. I told myself it was stress, work, life, anything but the thought that burned beneath my denial. Then there were the overlaps. I travel for work, always have. It's the one constant excuse that lets distance grow unnoticed. But one night, scrolling through emails I didn't remember opening, I saw a receipt for a hotel in Chicago, dated during a week she'd sworn she was home. I almost closed it, almost convinced myself it was a mistake. Instead, I started paying attention. Shared locations that appeared and vanished. Calls logged but empty of content. The same name popping up more often than coincidence allowed. Emily. A woman I knew. A woman I trusted. A woman whose laugh I could still hear from dinners we'd shared, her hand resting casually on her husband's arm, her eyes sometimes lingering just a second too long on me. I told myself I was paranoid. That attraction didn't equal action. That wanting didn't mean crossing a line. I was wrong. The first real confirmation came by accident. I was setting up her new phone after she claimed the old one had glitched. As I synced accounts, a message preview flashed on the screen before disappearing. One sentence. That was all it took. I still feel you on me. My chest tightened. Heat rushed to my face, not anger yet, but something worse. Recognition. I knew that tone. Knew what it sounded like when sex was still echoing between two people. I didn't confront her. Not then. Instead, I hired someone. The private investigator came recommended. Discreet. Expensive. The kind of man who didn't flinch when I explained what I needed. I expected confirmation. A timeline. Maybe a few photos. Something painful but manageable. What I got was a full map. He showed me spreadsheets of dates, places, receipts, hotel rooms booked under different names, meetings scheduled conveniently near my travel routes, messages recovered from backups she didn't know existed. Emily's husband had his own patterns too, business trips that weren't business, excuses rehearsed so well they sounded sincere. This isn't recent, the investigator said, tapping the folder. This is established. How long? I asked. He paused, choosing his words carefully. Longer than you think. That was the moment my denial finally collapsed. I went home that night and watched my wife sleep. Her breathing slow, peaceful, her body warm beside me. I remembered the way she used to pull me toward her, the heat between us, the rawness of sex that felt like truth. I wondered how many times she'd left our bed carrying that same heat somewhere else. I didn't wake her. Instead, I kept digging. Every detail rewrote my memories. Every laugh, every shared moment with Emily and her husband became suspect. I replayed conversations, touches, glances that had once felt harmless. I saw the sexual tension I'd dismissed, the familiarity that shouldn't have existed. And the worst part? They hadn't been careless. They'd been confident. Confident I wouldn't look. Confident I wouldn't question. Confident I'd play my role quietly while they wrote a future that didn't include me. By the time the investigator finished his work, I wasn't angry anymore. I was clear. Clear enough to know that when my wife raised her glass at that party, she wasn't celebrating life. She was making a move, and I was finally ready to respond. The investigator didn't tell me everything at once. He laid it out slowly, methodically, like someone who understood that too much truth delivered too fast could feel unreal. We sat in his office, the air smelling faintly of old paper and cheap coffee, while he slid one document after another across the desk. This goes back further, he said. Much further. I watched his finger trace a line on the timeline he'd printed. Dates stacked on dates. Cities repeating themselves like a code I should have noticed years ago. 3 years. More than 3, if you counted the early overlap. The messages that started harmless and ended with words that left nothing to the imagination. Emily was married less than a year when this started, he added. Your wife was already involved by then. The words hit harder than any accusation I'd imagined. Not because of the sex, I'd already accepted that, but because of the planning, the patience. This wasn't desire running wild. This was intention. They had schedules, backup plans, rules. Never the same hotel twice in a row. Never messages sent during predictable hours. Even their moments of sexual tension, preserved in texts and voice notes, were calculated. Desire expressed just enough to keep the fire burning without leaving scorch marks behind. I felt something inside me harden. They talked about money, too. That surprised me more than anything else. Accounts they might open, investments, a future that had nothing to do with love and everything to do with stability. Emily's husband was cautious, always thinking 2 steps ahead. My wife admired that. I saw it in the way she wrote to him, the respect woven between flirtation and fantasy. And then there was the baby. Not the announcement, not the toast, the discussions before it. They talked about timing, about waiting until things were clean, about not rushing, not forcing exits before the moment was right. They discussed how a pregnancy could change leverage, how it might complicate things if it came too soon. I stared at the pages, my name appearing only in the margins of their plans, a placeholder in conversations that assumed my silence as a given. I wasn't a partner. I wasn't even an obstacle. I was background noise. When were you going to tell me? I asked, though the investigator wasn't the one who needed to answer. He shook his head. That wasn't part of the plan. Driving home afterward, I felt detached, like I was watching my life from the outside. Every memory reorganized itself. The late nights she claimed were work, the way she sometimes pulled away from sex, distracted, distant, then returned days later with a hunger that felt borrowed. I used to think it was stress. Now I understood it was guilt colliding with desire. I thought about Emily too, about the way she looked at me sometimes, the flicker of something intimate in her eyes. Had that been part of the game? Or was I just another variable she enjoyed controlling? By the time I walked through my front door, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. This wasn't about betrayal alone. It was about being managed. My wife was in the kitchen, barefoot, humming softly as she poured herself a glass of wine. She smiled when she saw me, warm, practiced. The woman I loved. The woman who had been planning a life that didn't include me. She stepped closer, pressed a kiss to my cheek. Her body felt familiar, tempting, and suddenly foreign all at once. For a brief moment, I felt the old pull, the instinctive desire that still lived in my muscles. Sex had always been our language, but language can be learned by others too. You're quiet, she said. Long day, I replied. She nodded, accepting the lie without hesitation. That night, lying beside her, listening to her breathe, I realized something else. They hadn't underestimated my intelligence. They'd underestimated my willingness to stay quiet. And that was their first real mistake. The party didn't end. It decomposed. People didn't leave all at once. They drifted, hesitated, hovered near walls and door frames like witnesses afraid to abandon a scene too early. Conversations fractured into whispers. Every clink of glass sounded too loud, every breath too sharp. I stayed where I was, near the center of the room, because moving felt unnecessary. The damage was already done. Emily was the first to break. She stepped toward her husband with a kind of controlled fury that only comes from humiliation ripening into clarity. Her voice was low, but it carried. "Tell me you didn't," she said. "Right now. Tell me this isn't what it looks like." He opened his mouth, then closed it again. The pause was answer enough. "I asked you something," she pressed. "I never meant to hurt you," he said finally. The oldest sentence in the history of betrayal. Emily laughed. Not loudly, not hysterically. Just once, sharp and incredulous. "You planned this," she said. "You don't accidentally plan." My wife watched them from a few feet away, arms crossed tightly over her stomach, her body instinctively protective now. I noticed how people looked at her, no longer glowing, no longer celebrated, just exposed. A woman whose announcement had detonated in her hands. She caught my eye, silently pleading. I looked away. Emily turned toward me then, and for a moment something complicated passed between us. Curiosity, maybe, or regret, or the shared understanding that sex, when layered with secrecy, can rot everything it touches. "How long have you known?" she asked. "Long enough," I replied. She nodded, absorbing that. Then she turned back to her husband, her voice steady and lethal. "Say it. Out loud." He swallowed. 3 years. A collective inhale rippled through the room. Someone cursed under their breath. 3 years wasn't a mistake. It was a parallel life. My wife made a small sound then, something between a sob and a gasp. "We were careful," she said weakly, as if that helped. "We tried to do this right." Emily stared at her. "There is no right way to fuck someone else's husband," she said calmly. The word landed hard, undeniable. I felt the tension shift again, sexual energy evaporating into something uglier. Truth. Emily's husband rubbed his face, panic finally cracking through his rehearsed calm. "It's not even that simple," he said. Everyone turned. "What does that mean?" Emily asked. He hesitated, then looked at my wife. Really looked at her, like a man realizing the script had changed. "The baby," he said slowly. "It might not even be mine." Silence again, thicker this time. My wife's head snapped toward him. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying the timing doesn't add up," he replied. "You said you were further along than you are, or earlier. I don't even know anymore." All eyes swung to me. I felt it. The expectation, the confusion, the sudden recentering of the narrative around my reaction. It was almost funny. Almost. "That's convenient," I said. "Blame biology." My wife shook her head, too fast. "No, that's not what this is. You know it's his." "Do I?" I asked. She stepped toward me again, voice dropping, intimate despite the crowd. "Please," she whispered. "Don't do this." "Don't do what?" I asked quietly. "Refuse to play along?" Emily backed away from her husband, hands trembling now. "You told me the baby would make things clearer," she said to him. "You told me it would force honesty." He looked cornered. "I told you it would change things." "And did it?" I asked. He didn't answer. People began to leave then, finally. Coats grabbed, apologies muttered, the night collapsing in real time. But the core of us remained, 4 people bound by lies that no longer held shape. My wife stood very still, her expression calculating again. I recognized it now, the instinct to regain control. She raised her chin. "We'll get a test," she said. "We'll prove it." Emily laughed again, bitter this time. "You don't get to prove anything anymore." I felt something settle inside me then. Not satisfaction, not victory, just certainty. This wasn't chaos. This was exposure. And none of them were ready for what came next. The word test lingered in the air like a challenge no one wanted to accept, yet no one could escape. My wife was the first to move after Emily spoke. She straightened her shoulders, smoothing her dress as if composure alone could rebuild authority. "We'll get a paternity test," she said again, louder this time, addressing the room that was now half empty. "That will end this." Emily crossed her arms. "You think science is going to clean this up?" "It will answer the question," my wife replied. Her voice was steady, but her hands betrayed her, fingers twisting together before she forced them still. Emily's husband finally found his footing. "I want it done," he said, publicly. No private labs, no delays. I won't be dragged through this without proof. The way he said proof irritated me. Like evidence would absolve him of 3 years of calculated deceit. Like numbers on paper could erase hotel rooms and whispered promises, the slow burn of sex that had fueled this whole mess. My wife turned to him sharply. You don't get to make demands. I do now, he shot back. You're not the only one with something to lose. I watched them argue, their dynamics suddenly stripped of secrecy and rendered pathetic under bright lights. The tension that once pulsed between them, charged, dangerous, had curdled into something defensive and brittle. Emily stepped away from him entirely. Do it, she said quietly. Get the test. I want to know who I married. Her eyes flicked to me, searching, measuring. I didn't offer comfort. I didn't owe anyone that. My wife turned to me last. You want this too, she said. It wasn't a question. You deserve to know. Deserve? I repeated. That's an interesting word. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. If there's even a chance it's yours. There isn't, I said. She froze. The certainty in my tone unsettled her more than anger ever could. You don't know that, she said quickly. I do, I replied. Because timelines don't lie. People do. Emily's husband frowned. What does that mean? It means, I said slowly, that dates matter. Doctors measure weeks carefully, and your stories don't align the way you think they do. My wife's eyes flickered, just once. A micro-hesitation most people wouldn't catch. I did. She looked away. That was when the room shifted again. Not loudly, not dramatically, but enough for me to feel it settle in my chest. Something was wrong. Not in the way betrayal was wrong, but in the way strategy was wrong. Say it, Emily demanded, stepping closer to my wife now. What aren't you saying? My wife pressed her lips together. This isn't the place. It stopped being private when you raised your glass, Emily snapped. Silence stretched. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator, the faint bass of music still playing in another room, oblivious. Finally, my wife exhaled. The test will explain everything. That's not an answer, Emily said. It's the only one you're getting tonight, my wife replied, her tone sharpening again. Defensive, controlled. Emily's husband looked between us, confusion knitting his brow. You said the baby would force honesty, he said to my wife, that it would make him stay quiet. My wife's head snapped toward him. I never said that. You implied it, he shot back. You said he wouldn't risk his reputation. I smiled then, just slightly. My wife saw it. What? She asked. You assumed silence, I said. That was your mistake. Her face hardened. You think you're enjoying this? No, I said honestly. I'm watching it. The conversation stalled after that. People finally left for good, murmuring excuses, eyes downcast. By the time the door closed behind the last guest, only the 4 of us remained, standing amid half-empty glasses and broken trust. Emily grabbed her coat. I'm done, she said, with both of you. She paused, looking at me. Thank you for not lying. She left without waiting for a response. Emily's husband stood there a moment longer, then followed, shoulders slumped, bravado gone. That left my wife and me. She turned to me slowly. You don't get to control how this ends, she said. I already am, I replied. For the first time that night, she looked truly unsure. And I knew then, the test wasn't the threat. The truth was, I didn't plan to reveal it that night. That was the part no one understood. Not my wife, not Emily's husband, not the friends who would later replay the story like a scandalous rumor polished for retelling. They all assumed I'd been waiting for a dramatic moment, some perfectly staged confession meant to humiliate. The truth was simpler. I had been waiting for certainty. It came when my wife hesitated. That flicker in her eyes earlier, the way her breath caught when timelines came up. It wasn't fear of exposure. It was fear of miscalculation. And suddenly, Every detail I'd filed away snapped into alignment. "You announced too early," I said quietly. My wife looked up sharply. "What?" "The pregnancy," I continued. "You rushed it." Emily's husband frowned. "That doesn't make sense." "It does if you're trying to force a reaction," I replied. "Weeks matter. Doctors don't guess. But people do, especially when they're trying to control the room." My wife shook her head, laughing once, thin and brittle. "You're reaching." "No," I said. "You are." Silence settled between us, heavy and deliberate. I took a step forward, not aggressive, not angry, just present. "The test you showed me wasn't fake," I said. "That much is true. You're pregnant." Her eyes widened, instinctively protective again. "But the date you told me?" I continued. "That was." Emily's husband's face drained. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying the pregnancy is real," I said evenly. "But it's much earlier than you claimed. Early enough that you thought announcing it publicly would lock me into silence." My wife stared at me now, truly staring, like she was seeing me for the first time. "You don't know that." "I do," I replied. "Because I checked. I spoke to the clinic you visited. Not about you, about protocols, about how dates are calculated, about what can't be confirmed at the stage you claimed." Her mouth opened, closed. Emily's husband stepped back, shaking his head. "You said you were further along." "I said what I needed to say," my wife snapped, finally losing control. "I needed leverage." The word echoed. Emily, who had returned quietly and stood near the doorway, froze. "Leverage?" My wife exhaled sharply, realizing too late that the room had turned against her. "I thought—" She stopped, recalculated. "I thought if I made it real, if I made it public, he wouldn't dare contradict me." She looked at me then, eyes burning. "You care about how you're seen. You always have." "That's where you were wrong," I said. "I care about truth more." Emily's husband sank into a chair, hands gripping his hair. "So the baby is yours," I finished, "just not on the schedule you planned." The realization crushed him. Not relief, not vindication. Defeat. He'd thought uncertainty might buy him time, sympathy, maybe even forgiveness. Instead, it stripped him of the last illusion he had left. My wife turned back to me, voice softer now. "I didn't think you'd speak." "I know," I said. For a moment, memories flooded me. The way she used to pull me into bed with urgency. The way sex had once felt like connection instead of camouflage. I remembered believing intimacy meant honesty. That desire equaled loyalty. I saw now how easily passion could be weaponized. "You used the pregnancy like a shield," I said, "and a threat." She looked away. Emily laughed quietly, hollow. "You really thought a baby would clean this up?" My wife didn't answer. The silence stretched until there was nothing left to hide behind. No party, no audience, just consequences. "I'm done," Emily said finally, "with all of you." She left without looking back. Emily's husband followed soon after, shattered, stripped of the control he'd mistaken for intelligence. That left my wife and me again. She stood there, smaller somehow, less certain. "You didn't have to destroy me," she said. I met her gaze. "You destroyed us the moment you assumed I'd stay quiet." For the first time, she had nothing to say, and for the first time in months, neither did I. The truth had done what lies never could. It ended everything. The collapse didn't happen all at once. It came in waves, quiet and relentless, the way buildings fall after the foundation has already given up. Emily moved first. She didn't shout. She didn't cry. She simply walked back into the room, picked up her bag, and stood in front of her husband with a calm that terrified him more than anger ever could. "I'm leaving," she said. "Not for the night. Not to cool off. I'm done." He stood up so fast his chair scraped loudly against the floor. "Emily, wait, please. We can fix this." She shook her head. "You don't fix 3 years. You don't fix planning a child around lies. He reached for her arm. She stepped back. Don't, she warned. You lost the right to touch me. The words landed harder than any slap. Around them, the last few friends who hadn't left yet watched in silence, their faces tight with the uncomfortable realization that they had misread everything. Some of them had defended my wife earlier. Some had looked at me like I was cruel. None of them said a word now. Emily turned toward my wife. You thought this made you powerful, she said quietly. All it did was show me who you really are. My wife didn't respond. She stood frozen, arms wrapped around herself, her pregnancy no longer a shield, but a weight. The confidence she'd carried so effortlessly earlier was gone, replaced by calculation that had nowhere left to go. Emily left without another glance. Her husband followed her to the door, his voice breaking as he begged her to listen, to stay, to give him time. The door closed in his face. The sound echoed through the house, final and unforgiving. That was when he broke. He slid down against the wall, hands shaking, eyes unfocused. I didn't think it would end like this, he said to no one. I thought I could manage it. I watched him carefully. This wasn't remorse. This was loss of control. My wife finally moved then. She took a step toward him, instinctively, as if aligning with the only person left who shared her guilt. You promised this wouldn't happen, she said. He looked up at her, rage flashing through his despair. You promised me he wouldn't speak, he shot back, jerking his head toward me. You said he cared too much about appearances. Every eye turned to her. Friends who'd known us for years, people who'd trusted her, people who had congratulated her minutes earlier. I watched understanding spread across their faces, slow and inevitable. She tried to recover. That's not what I meant. It is, he said bitterly. You used him. You used all of us. The room felt colder. Someone picked up a coat and left quietly. Another followed. No one said goodbye to her. My wife turned to me then, desperation finally winning. Say something, she whispered. Please, you don't have to ruin me. I looked at her, really looked. The woman I'd loved, desired, trusted. The woman who had used sex, vulnerability, and a pregnancy to manipulate outcomes. I felt sadness, not anger. Sadness for what we'd been and what she'd chosen instead. I didn't ruin you, I said. I stopped protecting the lie. Her shoulders slumped. She understood that now. There was no leverage left, no audience to charm, no narrative she controlled. Emily's husband stood, wiping his face, suddenly aware of how alone he was. I'll fix this, he said weakly. I'll talk to her. I'll do anything. No one answered. The house emptied until only the three of us remained, me, my wife, and the wreckage of what she'd tried to engineer. She sat down slowly, one hand resting on her stomach, eyes unfocused. I thought if I forced the moment, she said quietly, everything would fall into place. I didn't respond, because some collapses aren't loud. They're absolute. The days after the party blurred together in a way that felt unreal, like I'd stepped out of my own life and was watching someone else handle the wreckage. Phones rang constantly, messages stacked up unanswered. Friends reached out, some offering support, others fishing for details they could later retell as entertainment. I ignored most of it. Silence had become my only form of control. My wife tried to talk the next morning. She stood in the doorway while I packed a bag, her face pale, eyes rimmed red from a night without sleep. We can still fix this, she said, her voice softer than I'd heard it in months. You don't have to walk away. I didn't look at her. This isn't something you fix, I replied. It's something you live with. She followed me through the house, desperation replacing calculation. She talked about history, about sex that still meant something to her, about the way we used to fit together in bed, skin against skin, breath tangled. For a moment, memory tried to pull me back. Desire doesn't disappear overnight, but neither does clarity. When lawyers entered the picture, things became colder. Documents replaced emotions. Dates, assets, statements. The pregnancy shifted from spectacle to liability. My wife's tone changed again. Sharper now. Protective. Not of us, of herself. She asked about reconciliation less and about settlements more. Emily filed for divorce within the week. Her husband spiraled. He sent messages apologizing, explaining, reframing everything as confusion rather than choice. Emily didn't respond. When she finally spoke to him, it was through her attorney. The man who had once believed he could manage everyone found himself managed instead, reduced to signatures and court dates. I saw Emily once during that time briefly, in a parking lot outside a cafe. She looked thinner, tired, but clearer somehow. "I don't hate you," she said quietly. I needed to say that. Then she added, "I don't know if I hate him yet, but I will." My wife tried one last time after that. She came to my temporary place late one night, standing too close, her presence heavy with familiarity. She told me she was afraid of being alone, afraid of raising a child without stability. She reached for me, fingers brushing my wrist the way they always had, her touch still capable of stirring something dangerous. "I didn't do this because I didn't love you," she said. "I did it because I was scared." I stepped back. "Fear explains actions," I said. "It doesn't erase them." She cried then. Real tears, finally. But even that didn't move me the way it once would have. I realized I wasn't angry anymore. I was finished. The legal process dragged on, methodical and impersonal. Reputations cracked quietly. Friendships realigned. The story lost its heat and became history, something people referenced carefully, as if afraid it might still burn. One evening, alone, I thought about how easily I could have stayed silent, how much simpler it would have been to accept the lie, raise a child that wasn't mine, preserve the image everyone admired. The thought didn't tempt me, because what I'd gained wasn't revenge, it was distance. And in that distance, I finally began to breathe again. Months later, the city felt different, not because it had changed, but because I had. The noise didn't press in as tightly. The silence didn't scare me. I'd learned how to exist without constantly bracing for impact. I was leaving a bookstore when I saw Emily. She stood across the street, holding a paper cup of coffee with both hands like it was something warm she needed to protect. Her hair was shorter now, her posture looser. She looked like someone who had been through fire and decided not to pretend it hadn't burned. For a moment, we just looked at each other. Then she smiled. Small. Real. "Hey," she said when we met halfway. "Didn't expect to see you." "Neither did I replied. We stood there awkwardly, two people connected by a past neither of us had asked for. I noticed she wasn't wearing a ring. I didn't comment. Some absences don't need to be named. "How are you?" she asked. I considered the question. "Lighter," I said finally. "You?" She exhaled slowly. "Clearer, not happier. Not yet, but clearer." We walked together without planning to, drifting down the street as if conversation had momentum of its own. She told me she'd moved, started over somewhere smaller, that she was relearning what trust felt like when it wasn't negotiated in secret. I told her I'd done the same, in my own way. We stopped near a crosswalk. She turned to face me fully then, her expression serious. "I wanted to say something," she said. "That night, you didn't do it for revenge." "No," I said. "I didn't." She nodded. "I know. You did it because you refused to lie." I didn't answer. Some truths don't need defense. She smiled again, softer this time. "Funny thing," she said. "You were the only honest man in the room that night." The light changed. Cars began to move. Life continued. She hesitated, then stepped forward and hugged me. It wasn't sexual. It wasn't loaded. Just human. Just acknowledgement. When she pulled away, there was gratitude in her eyes, not longing. "Take care," she said. "You too." She crossed the street and disappeared into the crowd. I stood there a moment longer, watching the space where she'd been, feeling something settle into place. The story had ended, not with closure, but with acceptance. Not with justice, but with truth. I thought about my wife, about who she had been to me, about the intimacy we'd shared, about the lies that had wrapped themselves around desire until nothing honest could breathe inside it. I didn't hate her. Hate would have kept her close. This was different. This was freedom. I walked on, unburdened, unclaimed, untouched by the wreckage behind me. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough.